The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Wednesday, so we are very excited about the lineup that we have for you here this morning. First, we are going to have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh answering your questions during Ask Dr. Doreen. Then a little bit later on, we have an interview that we just taped this morning with Stripp Sr. He is the author of Mommy, I Wish I Could Tell You What They Did to Me at School Today. He became a close friend of Avonte Aquendo's family, and he's going to talk to us about the news that we got yesterday that the DNA match is there. We now know that the remains that were found were a match for Avonte. It's very sad news, and Rick's going to talk to us a little bit about what it was like hearing that and what it was like during the search with the family, and what we can take away from this. Then we have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We have two really incredible guests that are going to be with us today. A fantastic blogger dad, because this is Blogorama during January. He's going to be with us talking about dad issues, which we always appreciate hearing. And then we've got a wonderful special education attorney who's going to be here with us talking about some things that we need to go as we approach IEP season. So all of that and ever so much more during the next 2 hours as we take on autism from a 360-degree perspective. I want to remind you that the whole show, end to end, is meant to be interactive. We hope that you will participate with us with your thoughts, feelings, concerns, and suggestions. And most importantly, the questions that you need to have answered. So Emily's going to show you some of the different ways that you can participate here with us. I'll remind you that our home site, www.autism-live.com, is a great way to watch the show live. When you go there, you'll see a desktop with a computer screen. Click on the little triangle. That will allow you to watch either the live show or a recently recorded live show. Next to that is a long, skinny white box. This is one of the easiest ways that you can interact with us. It's totally free, totally interactive. Put your cursor there. You don't have to log in. We don't take any of your personal information, and there is no cost. Type whatever you would like there, hit enter, and it will appear here on my screen so that I can be asking your questions of Dr. Granpeesheh or any of our guests in almost real time. There is about a minute lag to it, so be aware of that. All right. We really hope that you will participate, but it's time for us to start with Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We welcome Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. She's here with us every Wednesday morning. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. I was sad when I walked in today and was listening to the other news.
Yes, we taped an interview with Stripp that we're going to play a little bit later on at the end of the hour. And we spent a little time talking about this. And what I didn't say to you is, as I was driving in this morning, I said, I'm so grateful that today is Wednesday, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I need an autism expert in my life today.
Oh, okay. Oh.
You know, because this is an emotional time, and it's hard for all of us. I don't pretend to know what the family is going through, but it's personal on a level to all of us. It's one of our own, and I think it hits close to home, and we think, what can I do with my own child, and what can I do to prevent this for all children?
Right.
And one of the things that I was really overwhelmed about, we filmed a little thing yesterday, and I really said, this is something that didn't have to happen. This is a tragedy. Of course, we're talking about, for those of you who just tuned in. We're talking about Avonte Oquendo and the fact that his remains were identified yesterday. It's a very tragic end to a very tragic story. But he walked away from his school. He was in school. His parents thought that he was safe and he was well cared for, and he walked out the door. It wasn't the first time that he had eloped. So they had prior knowledge that he was capable of doing that. And I said yesterday, this is tragic because it could have been avoided if the right training had been in place and people had implemented that training. And what astounded me was the outpouring of people last night on my personal email and my personal Facebook saying, this reminds me of my child, and you're talking about this as though it didn't have to happen. I need to have more information. So I'm so grateful that you're here this morning, and I want to take a couple of minutes here at the start of the show to have you talk to us about bolting, wandering, eloping, all these things that we call when our children leave where they're supposed to be. Of course, I always remind everybody that we can't give child-specific advice ever in this environment.
Right.
But Dr. Granpeesheh,
this is a really, it's a terrible thing that has happened. It really is. I mean, it's terrible for everyone. I'm sure that the family, I can't even imagine the devastation that you go through with something like this. But I also think, Shannon, that the people at school who were taking care of him or supposed to be there for him are also probably feeling pretty awful right now.
I would imagine.
You know, these things happen. Accidents are never meant to happen and can always be avoided with some precaution. You know, who knows who at that moment wasn't paying attention and what's going on in their own life, or, you know, you can't. But the truth is that it is a scenario that happens way too often. And I think if you mentioned that it was like the fourth time that he walked out. You know, this sort of thing happens so often in schools around the country. It is shocking. And obviously people who are in these schools know that our children can't notify, express themselves, that they have a tendency to just wander off, they're curious, that they don't have fear, that they don't understand safety. So I think more than the fact that just a lot of training should have occurred, what's more shocking, I suppose, to me is that there wasn't an alarm system in place or a lock. Most of the time, so here for our viewers who, if you are concerned for your own child, you need to make 100% sure that your school is safe. And by that, I mean a few different things. One is, I mean, you know, a lot of schools now, because I have therapists who go to the schools all the time, will require you to check into the office. In fact, you can't really gain access to the inside of the school unless you go to the office and get your name signed in and get a badge or whatever it is. But what's much, much, much more important and much, much more likely than a person coming in, you know, they do all of that so that they can prevent someone from coming in and abducting a child. Right. Okay. Is that more likely, or is it more likely for our children to run away, which I think often the second one is more true prevalent. And so it's important that the schools have a lock system on all the gates, on all the doors, and that either the staff have magnetic card access or key access or combination lock access, and that's it. A lot of these, you know, I know that for the purposes of fire safety, there has to be readily accessible exits, which of course can be in place, and if there, in other words, 9 out of 10 doors can be locked if one is left open for fire safety. Now, the fire doors have to have an alarm on them. That is just imperative. Just think about how simple this is. In this particular case, had there been an alarm, everybody would have been informed that a child is walking out and shouldn't be. Had there been an alarm, it's just that simple. It's really... So to begin with, I think that is the number one thing that gives parents a sort of ease of mind in terms of safety. Right. And then, of course, there's a lot that can be done with training. I think it's a little bit more, you know, and we can talk a little bit later in the show on how we actually train safety skills. It's a big thing for us. But the issue is more that I think it's a matter of funding and educational budgets, because a lot of the aides and people that who work in these schools and or day centers, living centers, whatever, all the different types of homes and residences, schools, day programs, all of these, they're so they're not trained. They are paid minimum wage.
Yeah.
They usually have very difficult lives. They're working very, very long hours in some cases. They have very weird schedules. They have sort of schedules that are similar in some cases to nursing schedules. So they go like 3 days straight, long hours, and then 2 days off. Very strange schedules because they have to be there overnight in some cases. But even school personnel, aides, I mean, they're paid minimum wage.
Yeah.
And these guys, I can't even count the number of times I've gone to do an observation of a child in a school who's supposed to have an assigned aide, and the aide is outside having a smoke or asleep in their car or whatever, completely not there. And that happens all the time, Shannon. It happens all the time. And I think it's just a quality control issue. And it's so important. We have to be more careful with these types of situations. So at the very minimum, if there's an aide present, then obviously, and if the ratio, I mean, there's so many different things, put a lock, put an alarm, make sure there's an aide there who isn't watching over 25 kids, is only responsible for maybe 5 kids or 10.
Right.
And then, is trained to keep their eye on this. And I'm very sad to say, but truthfully, when something like this happens, now, of course, people will be alarmed and there will be possibly better training, for some time, and then a year from now we'll forget about it again, and then people will go back to whoever got away with it will get away with it. I mean, this is just how things are. It's very annoying. It's very aggravating. The first time that I realized that I took note of the importance of this type of thing was, gosh, it would have been like 89, 88, and I was at that time doing I was at UCLA, but I was also doing a postdoc or an internship at the Help Group. And they had several homes, and I was doing the behavioral programming for their homes. And these were like, young, like older children and young adolescents or almost teenage. And there was one little boy who would often run away. And, the Help Group is a very good organization.
Yeah.
They had all sorts of alarms on every door. They had trained the local police. I mean, all the neighbors knew. It was, there's so many things you can do to make sure that there's second-level safety, third-level safety, and so on. And it made me realize at that time, oh my gosh, this is critical. Like, this is such an important issue.
Yeah.
So going back to, not wanting to just put all of this on the school, but honestly, there's so much that they could have done. And second, and, from the perspective of a parent who's really cautious or worried about this, right now, and for many years, there have been these watches or bracelets that actually act as like a LoJack type device, so that you just place it on your child cannot remove it. They cannot remove it. They also have ankle bracelets. And this then allows you at any given time to look and find the location of your child.
Yeah.
I mean, I often say, if it's safe for us, and I don't want to compare this, but I've thought about this for my own children. We're always worried about our kids, and especially when they're young and in this world.
Yeah.
I've always said, like, how do we place microchips in animals, but we don't even, and it's safe?
Right.
Why do we not do something like that? I know it sounds very like 1984-ish, but why not?
I agree with you, and I know that there are critics who say, "Oh my goodness, this is horrible." If it were optional, and if this is a real risk with your child, I don't think anybody would disagree with you. I think when your child is eloping, you're desperate to ensure that your child is going to stay alive,
Right.
And that is infinitely more important than all the personal anonymity, chipping.
Absolutely.
I mean, we chip pets.
Yeah.
And because we care so much and we don't want them to get lost. And the idea that there's some technology like that could keep a child safe, I think any parent who has a child who elopes would be thrilled to be able to do that.
Oh, and the technology definitely exists. It has existed for many years, because the first time I saw these sort of watch things that have a tracking device was before the internet age. I mean, right now, it's so easy to put a tracking device on your phone, on your car, on everything. And for our children, the technology definitely exists, and it's very, very important to actually consider these things, because in most cases, from what I'm told, if you are able to physically locate the individual within the first hour or so, or 2 hours actually, there's a much, much larger chance of recovery and safety than later.
Absolutely. I think they call it the golden window of opportunity to find a child. Well, all of this is so helpful in talking about those locks, because parents can go to their schools today and say, what is in place?
What are you doing? What are you doing for
what
us?
happens?
Right.
What are the possibilities? And walk the perimeter. See if the doors are locked. See if the gates are locked. I think this is, great super advice. But as you said, there's another side of this. So I want to take a break and come back and talk a little bit about how we work long term, because working on elopement, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not something that you fix overnight.
No, it's not.
But it's something that you can work on so that over time you can lessen how often this is likely to happen. So we're going to take a break and come back with Dr. Granpeesheh, and of course we'll be taking your questions as well. Stick with us.
Hello, fellow activists. Let's talk about step 6, live in gratitude and give back. Have you ever noticed that it's impossible to feel sorry for yourself when you focus on your blessings? I have an exercise for you. Take out 5 pennies. I want each penny to represent something you're thankful for today. Now, I bet not one of those pennies represented something material, but that every one of them represented someone you love or a moment you shared with that someone.
Go through life parched and empty, standing knee deep in a river and dying of thirst.
There's a song by Kathy Mattea called Standing Knee Deep in a River and Dying of Thirst. Sometimes we need to look at the river of blessings flowing underneath us, and then we see we're not so thirsty after all. Once you realize how fortunate you are, you can freely give back to others, and there's nothing that will make you feel more fortunate than giving to those less fortunate than you. So start your day with an attitude of gratitude, and until next time, keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have with us Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, a true expert in the field of autism and a visionary in the field of autism. And you've been talking with us today, giving us some real-life practical things, tools that we can use in light of this Avonte tragedy that we've all been mourning the last 24 hours, things that we can do to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. We've already talked about what kinds of technology has to exist in the schools. But you also mentioned that we can be working on the behavior. Some people call it bolting, some people call it wandering, some people call it elopement. But when our kids leave a space that they were supposed to be in and go.
Right. So the whole concept of elopement has to do with the fact that our kids don't really recognize safety or lack of safety. So they have no... first of all, they don't, when you're born, obviously, typically developing kids, we don't have fear. And fear is a learned thing. And it's either conditioned or it's learned. In other words, you either take it up by classical conditioning, where, for instance, you will hear loud sound and it's associated with an object, and the loud sound will startle you, and then that object that's associated with it becomes causes a reaction in you and becomes conditioned as a fear object, and then you avoid that because of the loud sound being so noxious. So it's kind of a classical conditioning. Or it's by operant conditioning, where it's learned, and you will have a consequence that is punishing. For instance, you put your finger on fire and it burns.
Right.
And then it is painful, so you won't do that again because you're immediately punished. And so it's very important to understand those two things first, because when I start to talk about how we teach fear, it becomes a touchy subject for people.
Right.
But you have to realize that in real life, when you are aware of natural stimuli and natural consequences of your actions in the environment, you learn fear.
Right. The environment teaches it to you.
The environment teaches you fear. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a psychologist I often refer to, Watson. We all know of Watson very well in the field of psychology. And his initial experiments showed that you could place a snake in front of an infant, and the infant would just think it's cute and want to play with it.
Right.
And if you stood behind the infant and made a very loud banging, like clapping sound, then the infant would be startled and then would become afraid of the snake.
Okay.
So it's a very, very, easy process. So now take that reasoning of teaching fear, because really what you're trying to do when a child elopes is to teach them that two things. First, you want to teach them that anything outside of the periphery that they are in is unsafe.
Okay.
And you don't want them to feel that at all times, because when is it safe? It's safe when they're with an adult, right? So it's unsafe if you're alone,
Okay.
and it's safe if you're with an adult. And those two things have to be taught kind of together, because if you teach a child it's just unsafe, then you're going to develop sort of an agoraphobic child, like someone who really doesn't want to leave the periphery.
Right.
But if you at the same time teach the child, no, it's okay, but you have to go with me or with an adult, then our children are very intelligent, and they will learn that,
Right.
okay, so I can go out, but I always need to make sure there's an adult with me.
Okay.
So now that portion of it, teaching that aspect of it, is pretty easy. We do this with our kids even if they want to go to a playground equipment or part of a playground. We will not allow them to go unless they have another child go with them, just as one of the tools to have them interact, just as an example. So let's say we know it's a child who wants to really elope and likes to run out. Okay, very, very simple. You have an adult standing near the gate first, and the child wants to go out, and you have the door locked, and you will model for the child or individual adult to go get the adult, hold them by the hand, and then they can go out. And if you do that a few times, maybe 10 times, the adult or child that you're working with will identify and learn that, I can't go out alone, I can go out with someone else.
And so the reinforcement is you get the adult and you get to allow the access to the thing you want.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that portion you teach, and that's a separate step.
Okay.
The other step is teaching them never to leave alone.
Right.
And the only way you can do that is to teach them some level of fear when they do elope alone. Now, I had some families in the past where I've had like a child eloping many times, and it's just so scary.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing I could tell the family was, it's very, very simple. You hide outside. You just hide somewhere around the house, and the minute the child takes off, you jump out. You scare the child, you yell at your child, you do whatever you want that is fear-evoking or in some ways punitive,
Right.
and you take the child back in.
Okay.
And then at a different time, when the child is not attempting to elope, you actually take the child by the hand and go walk. So you're teaching the discrimination. It is good, we can go out together, but you cannot go out alone.
Okay.
And that is, it's sort of, it's such a natural thing. When my kids were younger, I remember one time my little one, Charlie, was, I don't even remember how this came about, but we were at like a parking of Rite Aid or something, and she came out of the van. We had a minivan. She came out of the van and she was trying to play with me, and I think she would have been maybe 2 or something. So she was hiding behind the minivan, and I am looking around, and I'm about to lose my mind because I can't see her. It's like, where is she? And I'm like, and then the car next to me were parents, obviously, and noticed that I was in panic mode.
Right.
And then they were like pointing and saying she's hiding behind the van, and I sort of saw her and obviously yelled at her, you know,
Right.
because I was in such panic mode. And she remembers that even today.
Wow.
And, you know, but she realized two things, I think, during that time. One was, you know, it's not a good idea to scare mommy when I'm outside or something.
Right.
And the other thing, and you know, that's a certain level of empathy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think she learned just to make sure that I know of her whereabouts.
Right.
And that is a really important lesson for our kids. So, you know, and I can't tell you, Shannon, the number of kids that I've known over the years, or families that I've known over the years, where their child repeatedly elopes and is brought back by the police, or repeatedly elopes to the backyard where there's an uncovered swimming pool.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost 4 kids to swimming pools. I mean, it is horrible, and this is one of the most important things we have to do. As you know, our staff, our ARG team especially, they do a lot of work on safety and teaching our kids how to identify strangers and what to do if a stranger approaches you and so on. We also have trainings now for firefighters and police that we do in order to help them identify these types of situations. But as a parent, it's so critical to teach our kids to have a certain level of fear towards these, you know, these situations that can be very, very dangerous.
But we should be clear, because we'll get critics otherwise, that we're not talking about terrorizing the child or
Right.
electric shock therapy
Not at all.
or harming the child.
Not at all, right.
It doesn't take that to create fear.
Not at all, absolutely. I mean, our kids do react to, more than anything else, I think they react to being startled.
Yes.
Every child has a different thing. One of our kids we knew hated water, so Dad would wait outside, and if he was running onto the street or something, Dad would sprinkle him with water, and he hated that. I mean, it really just does have to do with it. Is, however, I mean, let's be very clear about this. There's no positive way of doing this. Fear is fear.
Right.
Fear is a negative emotion.
Right.
And from my perspective, curiosity is going to get all of our kids to want at some point to go out.
Sure.
And they are in situations where our kids do not understand safety. They do not understand they can be hit by a car.
Right.
They can be stolen by an individual. They can be fall in a river, and you know, they don't understand these things that are dangerous. Then there is no other way to prevent them from going and doing these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about when Jem was little, probably 3, and we were working on elopement because he had done it a couple of times. I was in a store, a big store, and he made a beeline. There was one of those doors in the back of the store that was a fire exit, so it had that alarm on it. And he was somebody he still doesn't like huge, loud noises. And he hit that yellow and black bar because it meant nothing to him. And I was already yelling, but you know, that meant nothing to him either. He hit the bar and all the alarms in the store went off, and he jumped back 5 feet, and that was the end of that.
That's
for
it.
him.
Fear is very fast conditioning. So
Yeah. And he never did that again.
Exactly.
He never did it again. And so it could be something as simple as an air horn that prevents the child from
An air
wanting to
horn
do it.
is actually a spectacular idea. It's a very, very good idea to do something like that. That's right.
But I just wanted to point out for people, because I think a lot of times people get this old idea that all of ABA is punitive and the kids are getting hurt.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
And in this circumstance where you're going to use a strategy like that, you're going to use it very mindfully and carefully.
That's right.
And the child doesn't get hurt by it, but we instill a response that they don't like.
Right. And I mean, I'll ask you, Shannon, why do you not jump off a cliff?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid of heights, first of all.
Or why do you not like jump into the Niagara River or Falls or something? It's because we know from a physics perspective, from a logical perspective, that you could die.
Yeah.
We know we could die because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Our kids don't have that comprehension.
Yeah.
So to them, when they see a river that might be going very fast, they don't think, "Ooh, this could be dangerous," like any other typical child might think of a certain age. They think, this could be fun.
Yeah.
And so it is very, very important that they are taught to avoid that, at least until the point that they can differentiate what is fun and what's dangerous.
Okay, really important information. I'm so glad you're here today to talk about these things with us. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back and answer some of your questions that you've put in on the live feature, so stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. It's January and a whole new year has gone by. To commemorate that, Autism Live and Smarty have decided to give you a template to make your very own time capsule. The materials you'll be needing are glue, a jar, photos, keepsakes, pen, and a template you can print from facebook.com/autism-live. Here's the template that I printed out from our Facebook page. Depending on the skill of your child, they can do this independently, or you're going to help them fill out all the questions. Once you have finished filling out the time capsule sheet, I've left 2 spaces on the top, one for a school photo, one for a family photo. Feel free to glue an image there. Now that I've glued the photos onto my sheet, now I'm going to grab my jar and start filling it up with all the things I would want to remember from the year that just passed. I would say include photos, mementos, toys, things that are going to be really important to you at this time and moment that you'll be excited to see later in the future. Once you're done filling up your jar with all the things that were important to you for the year 2013, you're going to want to seal it up. And it's up to you for how long you want to keep it locked up. Time capsules are a great way to remember where you have been and where you're going. So I hope you really enjoy this activity, and until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh here with us, and she's answering your questions that you guys have written in. We had a question on the live feature that says, I'm an adult with Asperger's syndrome. Many years ago, I was told I hallucinate when under stress. What I want to ask is why this only happens to some on the spectrum and not others, and also why does it happen?
That's a really good question. Okay. Hallucinations don't occur with ASD.
Okay.
So let's start right there.
Yeah.
If you are actually hallucinating with the technical definition of hallucination, like the real definition of a hallucination, in other words, someone has diagnosed you and said you are hallucinating, then that is not ASD, that is not Asperger's. Hallucinations only accompany a very set number of things, for instance, schizophrenia, as well as various other medications that may cause hallucinations, or drugs, or various other types of biochemical changes that may result in hallucinations, various types of tumors, etc., but not ASD.
Okay.
So that is your number one answer, first of all. Now, secondly, the other thing that I think you should consider is that we all, when we are, especially when we are under stress, but at all times, we hear voices. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are hallucinations.
Okay.
We all have an internal voice and an external voice. Like, we will talk to others, and when you think, thinking is very much like hearing a voice inside your head. It is, however, your own, and it is to a large, it's not necessarily always positive. It could be conditioned to be a negative voice, but it is a familiar voice. Let's say there are not numerous voices unless you've been traumatized. In some cases, when you have abusive upbringing. For instance, you will have the voice of an abusive parent in your head and so on. But what's very interesting is that sometimes individuals misunderstand the typical voice in their heads as being a hallucination. And that is very, very different.
Okay.
So, I think that it would be probably a good idea for this viewer to actually see an expert, which would be, I would suggest, a psychiatrist or a psychologist who has some experience in schizophrenia and autism. But also, if you are on medications, you may want to see a psychiatrist. And this is something that a professional should help you sort out.
Okay. All right. Great advice. Very, very interesting. We had a follow-up on the question that we had last week. Somebody had written in from England and wanted to know what affect meant, because it's she has a new baby, but she's studying to be a BCBA, hoping to be a BCBA. And somebody did a follow-up on it saying, what is an expected affect for a child on the spectrum? Understanding that there is a variable, but what is usual, and when do we know if a diagnosis might be incorrect? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love that question because historically a lot of people have thought that kids with autism have very flat affect, and this isn't true. Flat affect meaning they don't really show emotion.
Right.
And I don't think that's true. There's no point in going back historically, but I think there was some flat affect in kids when we were working with kids back in the 70s and 80s, but things have changed. Autism is a very, very different, it's molded into a completely different thing over the years. Not completely different, but quite different. And so what I would say is that most of the kids that I see now have very good affect. They're very attached to their parents. They laugh when you do something funny. They're sad when they see you become sad. A lot of the times kids have empathy. There are sometimes kids who are very involved in their own intrinsic universe. They're so very, very just kind of egocentric, and it's not, I don't want to say that in a bad way, they just don't really have the ability to see other people's perspectives, and therefore their own perspective is what takes over, and then in those cases their affect becomes a little bit flat because they become egocentric, and so the world is about them, not other people. But it is actually a question that I often ask at intake, like how does your child react if they see you upset, if they see a sibling upset, or so on. So that's that portion of the question. The other portion has to do with how do you know if a diagnosis. So to be clear on the first part, I think kids with autism have commonly pretty normal affect.
Okay.
With when you look at a diagnosis, it's very hard to base, to think that your diagnosis might be wrong just because your child has really appropriate affect and they said that autism shouldn't. Affect should not really play a big role in diagnosis.
Okay.
The diagnosis has to do with just skill delays, really. It has to do with the fact that the child is delayed in language and communication, is therefore delayed in a lot of social aspects of behavior, that the child is more interested in sort of rote repetitive types of stereotypical behaviors rather than interacting typically. So when you're looking at kids, they're not developing play, they're not developing communication with peers. It's never been hard for me to diagnose autism because I see it as such a, first of all, I know kids with autism better than typically developing kids, but it's not a mild thing. It affects a lot of different systems, and it causes alarm and concern in regards to many different areas of development.
Okay, so if we were to say that having a flat affect could end up being a part of autism, a diagnosis, but having an affect that was typical would not disqualify you from getting an autism diagnosis.
That is the perfect way to say it.
Okay.
That is a wonderful say. Yeah, so flat affect could also, though, lead, become a part of many other diagnoses.
Okay, good to know that
if you have flat affect, if you have very flat affect, or a child has flat affect, I would be concerned.
Okay. All right, good to know. I love that. Okay, here's one that I need your help with because I don't even remember what the jargon is. So, how much is usually approved by a district to conduct an IEE? I don't remember what an IEE is, unless you're talking about an IEP. And do they give a cap in hours, or does it vary? And maybe they're asking about maybe what you're actually asking is to do an FBA, because a lot of times we'll recommend that if somebody's having a problem with their child, they're getting notes coming home, that, ask for an FBA.
Yeah. I've never heard of an IEE.
Okay,
so
I'm glad.
guessing that it's an IEP.
Okay.
And then, so the question is...
How much time is usually approved by the district to conduct an IEP? And do they give a cap in hours, or does it vary?
Yeah, you're right. It can't be that they're asking about an IEP. I think the individual's probably asking for like an FBA or maybe an assessment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. The district's not allowed, just to generally answer this, the district is not, legally it's not appropriate or allowed to put a cap on this sort of thing. It has to do with your child's needs.
Okay.
So if your child has multiple issues and they all need to be assessed, then the district will have to fund different things. Like typically, I think we will get something like, I'm not even sure districts fund FBAs anymore, functional behavior assessments, because they'll do them themselves. They usually have someone who will do it. But if we are funded, we will probably get somewhere between around 16 hours for an FBA. I don't remember now. I'm just maybe 8 hours to conduct it, 8 hours to observe and write data and write a report. I'm not sure. That sounds like pretty much typical. On the other hand, other assessments are completely different, right? I mean, districts don't fund other assessments, insurance companies do. Okay. And other assessments, you might have an IQ test or a cognitive test that might last 2 days.
Yeah.
You might have language testing that's half an hour. So it's hugely variable. And depending on what the needs of the child are, the district has to accommodate.
Yeah. And I will say, too, in case there's another component to this question, if you've requested to have an IEP for your child and they've been doing the assessments, there are state-by-state requirements about they can't drag it on forever. They have to do that within a set amount of time to accomplish it so that your needs are met. They can't say, oh, well, we're going to do the assessments and we'll get to it next year. They can't do that. It is state by state. You would want to talk to a special education attorney. Most of them will give you a free consultation for a half hour or an hour. You could ask those kinds of questions of a special education attorney in your area, or also check with your local support group and ask somebody else about, what are the rules? How much time after I've asked for something in writing do they have before they have to deliver it to me? Because that's good information to know.
And advocates, especially.
Yes.
Sometimes attorneys are very busy or more expensive. Advocates are fabulous. I mean, advocates know a lot more, actually, in a lot of cases, because they really study on all the rules and they know what's going on. And I really do recommend that you, if you have any questions, your choices are to read all the material, which is a lot of material, or to find a really knowledgeable advocate.
Yeah.
A lot of times parents who have been successful with their own children provide advocacy services, and they're very helpful.
Ariva Martin from the Special Needs Network actually has a program where she takes parents and helps them to become advocates, but the deal is that then they need to turn around and help other parents.
Yeah, that's
really a remarkable program, and that's the Special Needs Network. Love that. But in any case, moving on, I love this question, and I'm sure that, they're not loving their experience of it, but the person writes, help, my 3-year-old daughter throws everything on the floor. What should I do? She thinks it's fun.
Yeah.
Right?
It is fun.
Well, of course it is. Especially if mom has to bend over and pick it up and gets exasperated. Woohoo! That's really exciting.
Yes, it's tough. That is very tough. Yeah, and stopping it is a little bit tough as well, because it's one of those things that here we go again, it's a behavior, you want to reduce the behavior, and so we're going to try and look at antecedents we can modify and consequences we can modify. And in terms of consequences, when she throws an object, there are basically two consequences that you should consider. One is kind of just being punitive about it, not making sure that your child kind of understands that that's not okay. A lot of times we don't do that. It's funny, we get so tired that we forget to just tell our kids, no, that's not okay. But that's very important because your child might start to understand that.
Right.
And the second thing is the typical procedure for throwing is overcorrection, which basically requires the child to be like, let's say she throws something, and you will then go in the location where she threw, and you will dump out like 5 more things. So let's say 5 blocks. Okay. Then now you will physically prompt the child to pick up the object and bring it back, but then also pick up 5 other objects one by one and bring them back. So it is still a punitive procedure because it involves forcing the child to do additional work.
Right.
In other words, instead of you picking it up all the time, you will need to have your child start picking it up, but you're going to have your child pick up more than just the one.
So you're going to suck the fun out of it, basically, is what you're going to do.
And it involves what's called positive practice,
right?
Which is just an interesting way of saying, it's a repeated practice of bringing the object back. So that instead of throwing it, they will bring it back. Nevertheless, overcorrection does work. Okay. The other side of it is an antecedent control procedure, which is blocking.
Yeah.
And that means that you would need to be present and make sure that you do not, you're there to prevent the child from throwing to begin with. Now that's hard because obviously the child will have access to a lot of different things. But I would say, if you do both sides, so like you try to be there as much as possible and prevent it, and on the other end, when it occurs, do an overcorrection procedure, you will stop the throwing. Overcorrection is important that you know how to do it correctly. So you should either get a professional who can advise you and help you, or you can also, I believe we would have a module on how to do overcorrection on IBT. And so you can go on IBT, view that module, or just that one module and learn it. And that will help you a lot.
And that's iBehavioral Training. Because I would .com, yeah. I would imagine that there are things about it like keeping your face neutral.
Yeah, it's very important that you don't engage in a lot of attention-giving behavior and so on. And again, it depends on why the child is. Obviously, you want to do an functional analysis and figure out why the child is throwing. But I have seen this behavior quite often, and to be honest with you, most of the time, the child actually finds joy in many aspects of this. One is the throwing itself, which you're going to try to prevent, and good, I'm going to come back to this in a sec. But the other side of it is sometimes the child enjoys your reaction to it, which is often picking it up, bringing it back, and that's sort of humorous. Now, the other thing is, on the side, outside of this, you would maybe want to replace the urge to throw. Sometimes this exacerbates things for our kids, and sometimes it really does help as a replacement behavior. So, get your child one of those cute little basketball, inside sponge basketball things, and have the child aim and throw and play that, so that you're containing the behavior of throwing in that appropriate setting, and in the normal setting, you're sort of preventing it.
So you're redirecting it, making it something functional.
Right,
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, last question here. My son is 5 and has major sensory issue with his mouth and still chews/sucks a pacifier, which is causing speech problems. How do I remove the pacifier without causing other problems for him?
Removes the pacifier, but he'll get over it.
He will get over it? Okay.
I mean, you can fade things off, or you can expose him to a sudden. So one of the things, you can either remove the pacifier, and then yes, he will get upset, but then he will overcome it. Or you can certainly replace the pacifier, but at this point I don't know that you want to, because you don't really want something in his mouth all the time. You could potentially replace it with gum. Which he would then chew, but then get rid of. And if you want to shape away the use of the pacifier, then you can start to cut very small chunks of the pacifier, very, very small. So the tip of the pacifier, you will like just take a small piece off.
Okay.
Then 2 days later, you take another small piece off, and then before you know it, it'll be small enough where your son won't even like it anymore.
Okay. Interesting. That would never have occurred to me. Okay. Well, and so since that was so quick, I've got time for one more.
Sure.
My 12-year-old is still struggling with shoe tying. Help.
Oh gosh, there's a really good. I forget the name of it, but that's just so. First of all, if your child doesn't have fine motor issues, so like of course you need to make sure that from a fine motor perspective he's able to do it.
Okay.
Then that is a procedure that is a thing that you would teach through the procedure of backward chaining,
Which was our jargon yesterday.
Okay, great.
Which is great.
Great. So you would do it, and first of all, most kids find it easier to do the double hoops in a knot rather than one around the other.
Okay.
So you will do all steps of this except the last step. So you will make the double hoops, and you will probably put them around and in, and then all your son has to do is pull them tight.
Okay.
And you'll do that until he's very good at that.
Okay.
Now, then you'll make the double hoops, and you'll pull them around, and you'll just put the tip inside the knot, and then your son has to pull it out and tighten it. And then he's very good at that. And then you will now make the double hoops, and you'll go around, but you won't actually make a knot. And you'll prompt him, and he will. And now he knows the other two steps, which is pulling it through and tightening it. Great. He's very good at that. And now you will just produce the double hoops, and he does all the rest.
Okay.
And then you will produce one hoop, and he will produce the other. And then you will do nothing, and he'll do the whole thing.
Awesome.
So that's backward chaining. And
Awesome.
It takes practice.
Yeah, and time, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But worthwhile
and a lot of
to
reward.
do.
You have to give him a lot of reward for
Okay.
every step that he masters.
All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
It's just always such a wonderful thing to hear you talk about these things because then we know what's possible.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's empowering. So thank you
Thank
so
you very much. Thank you.
We are going to pause now and show you an interview that we conducted early this morning with Richard Stripp Sr., who is the author of the book, Mommy, I Wish I Could Tell You What They Did to Me at School Today. He became very close to Avonte Aquendo's family as the search went when he went missing. So we'll show you that, and then when we come back, we'll be here for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Two amazing guests, a dad blogger who we've had on the show before who's absolutely amazing. You're going to want to hear what this dad has to say. And then we have a special education attorney who's going to be getting us ready for the IEP season. So take a look. This is Richard Stripp. Joining us on the phone right now is Richard Stripp Sr. He is an autism advocate and the author of the book, Mommy, I Wish I Could Tell You What They Did to Me at School. He has been very much a part of the search for Avonte and become very close to the family. So Rick, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. We know this is a very difficult time for both you and your family and for the Aquendo family. And I want to start by asking you to tell us how you became involved in this story.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Shannon, for having me on. And I'm sorry that I was unable to talk to you yesterday. I was just too emotionally upset. Myself, like so many people around the country, were following the story of Avonte since October 4th, when he ran out of his school in New York City. And I watched the news every night, hoping that he would be found, and just keeping updated on it. And about 10 days after he initially ran off, one of the New York stations on the nighttime news, one of the newscasters mentioned that the family had set up a tent, hoping that Avonte would come back to the school. They set up a tent right in front of the school, and they were having a family member there around the clock, 24/7, hoping that Avonte would come back to the school, and then if and when he did, there would be somebody there that he recognized. And the newscaster mentioned how cold it was getting, and these poor folks were, staying in this tent all night long in the bitter cold, and they could probably make use of a motorhome. And I happened to be off that week. That was on a Monday, I believe. I happened to be off that entire week. My wife and I had just bought a motorhome the year before. Actually, I came out to be on your show in that motorhome, and I said to my wife, I said, you know what, Liz, I said, I'm going out there. I got the week off. I'll just go out and offer my motorhome. And so that's what I did. The following morning, Tuesday morning, I drove into New York City, about an hour and a half from where I live in New Jersey. And when I got there, I told the police that were stationed there the purpose why I was there, and they shuffled some news media vehicles around, and they put me right next to the tent. And I went and introduced myself to the family. Danny, Avonte's brother, Danny, was sitting there. I recognized him from the news. I walked over and I introduced myself and told him while I was there. He shook my hand and went and got Avonte's mom and dad. And they came over and were very grateful. And I took them into the motorhome and said, "Hey, it's here for your use. Any friends of the family, you sleep here, eat, stay warm. Just get away from it. It was a media circus, quite frankly. Just to get away from the media or have interviews in there." And they did all those things, and that's how I got to know them. And in the week that I spent there, we just became very, very close.
And you've stayed very close to them, and you've followed this story very closely. It's become personal to you, knowing the family. And of course, yesterday we all got the news that the remains of the body that were found last week were in fact a DNA match with Avonte. It was crushing news. And I'm wondering if you could tell our viewers about what that was like for you and for your family hearing that.
Just devastating, Shannon. Just absolutely devastating. Unfortunately, I had a gut feeling all along that this was not going to end well. When I was doing my search efforts, I searched every day that I was there, and a week after I brought the motorhome down, I had to leave because I had medical testing I had to get done. But, myself and my wife and friends and family, we went back numerous times to help search for Avonte and just try to comfort the family. And I concentrated my search efforts along the banks of the river there because it was right across the street from the school. And one of the things on all the news media that they show where Avonte is outside of the school, they show the two clips. They show where he's running in the hallway, and then they show where he's running outside of the school. And when he disappears underneath some scaffolding there and some construction, 5 seconds later, he reappears and he crosses the street towards the river. He did not go. He went. If you're looking at the video, he went to his left to the town. So I, all along. But we were all praying and all hoping, and the family, remained hopeful. One of the things I said to Daniel, who's the father, when I asked him, just well into it was probably a month or so into this, month and a half, and I had a heart-to-heart with him, and I asked everybody to leave us alone. We were in a different motorhome at that time, and I asked everybody to leave us alone, and I had a heart-to-heart with him, and I asked him if he still believed that his son was still alive, and he said, "Yes, Rick, I have to believe that." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "That's good, and we're all going to continue to pray." I said, "But with the amount of time that's passed, you have to prepare yourself in the event that he is not." And we both started crying, and so to answer your question, I was just devastated that the young lady found some of the remains last Thursday at, I think it was about 7:15 our time out here on the East Coast. And Avonte's dad, he was in Florida at that time. He went back to Florida. He's remarried and has a little 9-year-old boy in Florida. He reached out to me Thursday night and just thanked me for everything, but did not mention what was going on at that time. And then, of course, the following morning, everybody knew. And And we've been in touch. I spoke to him, last night, to the dad. I spoke to Avonte's brother Danny yesterday morning. And they're just having a very, very difficult time. I mean, this is it's closure as far as where Avonte is, but it's certainly not closure for them or for any of us about what happened to Avonte and having Avonte there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, we should say that you are somebody who's worked extensively. Yeah, you absolutely did.
A little bit.
I appreciate you talking to us today. I know. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me, Rick? Can you hear me, Rick? We may have lost him. But Rick is no stranger to the field of autism and was somebody who worked extensively in classrooms with individuals who are on the autism spectrum.
Hello?
Are you back with us, Rick? I don't think he can hear me. But, and Rick eventually left working in classrooms, and
Hi, this is Rick.
he authored the book, Mommy, I Wish I Could Tell You What They Did to Me at School Today. An amazing book that we would encourage everybody to watch. If we can get Rick back, I'd like to talk to him about what parents can be doing to ensure that this... Do we have you, Rick?
Yeah, what happened there?
We got disconnected, but that's okay. I've been telling our viewers about who you are and about your book and how you're no stranger to autism and what can happen in the schools and how sometimes it's really devastating if we don't have people who are properly trained and compassionate and care about the safety of our kids. It can really be a disaster. And I really want to encourage everybody to read your book, Mommy, I Wish I Could Tell You What They Did to Me at School. And I'm wondering, Rick, if you have any words of wisdom for us. I realize it's a hard day for everybody, but any words of wisdom for the parents out there who have special needs kids that are going to schools and how we keep them safe?
Well, I talk about that in the book, of course. One of the biggest things is training. Anyone that's going to be in contact with a special needs child should have very extensive and specific training in regards to those child's disabilities and their needs. One of the things that I say in the book that special needs children being placed in the care of untrained and unqualified staff is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And in Avonte's case, I don't know at what point I got disconnected when I was talking to you, but in Avonte's case, we're not sure yet what happened as far as him leaving the school. We know that he was transitioning from one classroom to another. There was 6 students, him being one of them, and the reports that we got were that there was 1 teacher and 1 classroom aide. By the way, I'd like to clarify for everybody, there's so much misinformation out there. Avonte did not have a one-on-one personal aide.
Okay, good for us to know. Rick, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I have one last question for you. We're getting a lot of conflicting reports coming in that have raised a lot of questions in a lot of autism parents' minds, and you may not know any answers to this, but we're hearing that the underwear on the remains that were recovered did not match the underwear that his mom said that he had left home with that morning. Do you know anything about that?
The only thing I know on that is what was reported on the news. But there can be numerous explanations for that. That does not necessarily mean that there was foul play involved.
Yeah.
Vanessa did dress him in the mornings, but as someone who has worked in a school with children with autism for a very long time, we all know that many times these children have accidents as far as wetting their pants or soiling themselves.
Yeah.
And numerous times I personally have had to use underwear that we had extra in the school, or the nurse's office always had extra underwear if the parents did not send in underpants. So
All right.
if that is indeed the case, and that has not been verified totally yet that is the case. But if that is the case, that doesn't mean that there's foul play.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you weighing in on that. Rick, thank you so much. And again, we want to encourage people for a hopeful message. I always say your book is not the easiest book to read because it's very frank, but it's an important book. Mommy, I wish I could tell you what they did to me at school today. Thank you so much, Rick. Please give our best to your family. And if you talk to the Oquendo family, give them our regards as well.
I certainly will.
All right.
I certainly will.
Take care.
God bless everyone. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. We'll be back with more Autism Live and Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy after these messages.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I say good morning, however, for us here it is a very sad morning.
Yes, it is indeed.
As you've heard and just saw in the interview that Shannon did, the remains of Avonte Oquendo have been identified. And while all of us in the autism community had held high hopes that Avonte would be found alive, he has not been. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, for me, and I know I speak for both of us, this story represents the sad, dark side of what it means to have a child with autism, because from all appearances, this child who was a known wanderer, eloper, was allowed to do so and was not kept safe. And that is just wrong. So it's a very, very sad day for our community. Mm-hmm. And I know many of us, our prayers and our condolences are with the family. And more will be coming out on this story. They don't know. From what I understand, Shannon and you have had some discussions about this. Yeah. They haven't confirmed that there was any abuse or foul play, but we don't know.
We don't know. I mean, that's something and we just talked with Richard Stripp about that, there is a question about the underwear that he was wearing was not the underwear that his mom sent him to school with. But I appreciated that Rick was telling us that there could be other reasons for that other than foul play. So I'm going to hope for that. Because on top of everything else, I hope that there weren't other atrocities done to this child. And I do want to address, somebody had just written in and said, do you know what classroom he was in? What we know at this time, what's been reported, is that when he eloped, it was a period of time between classes when students were in the hallways, but he was in a group of 6 students that were with a teacher. There is an aide for those 6 students. We don't know if the aide was with them. It is reported that there is videotape showing him going out the door, past a security guard, and it was reported earlier this week that there was audio tape of the security guard talking to him. Now, we've heard from the lawyer that is associated with the family that he has not heard that audio tape yet, so I don't know who that's coming from. So we'll see. I said yesterday, we have the answer of where Avonte Oquendo is, and it's a terrible answer, but the rest of the questions are still very much present, and there's a lot more to be revealed in this case.
I was surprised this morning because I did turn on the national morning news shows. No mention of this no mention.
And I know it was all I could talk about yesterday, yes. and all that I was, people called, and if it was an autism family, that was exactly what we talked about. And if it was somebody else, and I said, I'm just having a rough day. This has been devastating. It rocks you.
It does.
And they were saying, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And I thought, how can that be?
Yeah.
How can that be?
Yeah. And for those of us who have children who have a history of wandering and elopement and have had it happen with our children, we trust our educational system. We trust procedures that are in place to safeguard these types of children on the spectrum. And evidently that trust was unfounded in this case. So.
And if you're just joining us, I want to point out that in the first segment that we did today with Ask Dr. Doreen, she addressed this issue from a lot of different perspectives about what schools should have on board, what we as parents can ask for, and how we can attack this behaviorally.
Right.
but safety measures. So I encourage you to go back and watch that.
And we
interview.
do, a little later in the show, we have Erik Menyuk from the firm of Newman, Aaronson and Vanaman, and he's got a seminar coming up on school districts and regional centers that is interactive. It's going to be great. So he's going to be talking a little bit more about that.
But before that, we are going to have a really wonderful, awesome autism dad who is a blogger. This is Blogorama month here. And so we're featuring blogs by people on the spectrum or about things that have to do with the spectrum. His blog, Adventures in Aspergers, always in the top whenever they do autism blogs and they rate them. His is always number 1 or number 2 because it's amazing. And he is an amazing individual. So we're going to be back with Tom Hibben, so stick with us.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but you know, we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting 2 battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, you know, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle, and without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get 2 kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Aspergers, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. You know, we underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Nancy. We are joined right now via Skype by Tom Hibben. He is the autism dad who is the author of the blog Adventures in Aspergers. We're doing Blogorama right now featuring blogs that are about the autism spectrum, and his is an award-winning blog for a very good reason. It's absolutely beautiful to look at, and because he is an awesome autism dad, he's got a lot to say. So Tom Hibben, welcome back to Autism Live and to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy.
Thank you so much. It's so fun every time I get the chance to come on and hang out for a while.
We love to hear the dad's perspective. And so the blog is called Adventures in Aspergers. And Nancy and I'd like to know, tell us a little bit about your real life adventures in Aspergers. What's featured in this blog?
It is sick. It is sick. It is fart jokes at 3 o'clock in the morning because melatonin's not working. It is putting our pants on backwards, like, you know, early 90s rappers, and just going with it instead of turning them around. I mean, anything. We don't try not to sugarcoat anything, but, you know, at the same time, I'm not a big proponent of feel sorry for me or this is so hard. It sucks sometimes, but, you know, it's hilarious too. So
yeah. You know, it's great that you can help us find the humor in these situations, because usually there is humor, and sometimes when you're in the middle of it and you would rather scream, sometimes if you just look at the absurdity of it all, you can laugh.
And especially from a dad point of view.
Yeah.
And we should give people a little bit of background. What's your family situation, and how is Asperger's affecting your life?
You know, it's I have 3 sons who are 6, 8, and will be 11 in 2 weeks. It all hurts to say, but it's me and my wife. My wife is stepmom to my Asperger's son, who is about to turn 11, and my middle son 8, who has an anxiety disorder and a speech disorder. So it is interesting, and a dog and a cat now.
Okay, so basically, your wife's a saint.
She is, I don't even know. She went from, like, years ago anyway, we've been married for quite a while, but when we got together, my middle son was like, you know, 8 months old. I was a single dad with them all the time, and she went from being a 20-something-year-old girl to, like, hey, you want to move in with me and my kids, you know?
Well,
I don't even know, like, why she puts up with us.
And you're still together, so hey, you know what? It definitely, these trials and tribulations obviously have made you stronger. What can you tell us, Tom, what your biggest challenge for the family is in dealing with Asperger's and your other child's delays and issues?
Man, it's that line between 10-year-old boy and high-functioning autism. It's trying to figure out where to give slack and where to bop them on the head, you know, or, you know, get them to do what they need to do, especially whether school's getting harder, stuff like that, homework, and just balancing all that between what you want for them and what they're really able to do. And then pushing them past, you know, what they want to do and what they really can do. That's a huge difference, especially with my boy. So that's constantly an issue that's every single day, even more so than just, you know, your daily, like, let's make sure you don't stink.
Sure. Now, Tom, what part of the country are you coming to us from?
Right in the middle. We are about 30 minutes outside of Oklahoma City.
Okay.
So not quite in the sticks, but we're, like, right on the edge of the sticks.
Do you live on a farm? I noticed some hay bales and a pickup truck.
We are out a little more rural, not quite that far, but maybe in the next year or so, my middle one, and for a kid with, an anxiety disorder, the 8-year-old, to ask for a horse and a pig, it's a big deal. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's commit. I'm trying to convince my wife, let's buy a little bit of land.
And these are the adventures that you write about, all of these things, the real life things that happen as you're dealing with these real life issues, and with the sense of humor that we see you exhibiting here. So tell us, where can people find this blog, Tom?
It is adventuresinaspergers.com, and same way on Facebook. I mean, most of the time, if you search Asperger's blog, it's usually first on Google and stuff like that. So we're pretty easy to find, thankfully, and as well, sites like yours and other blogs like to link, and then we all share. It's a weird little sub community of people,
It's a great community.
Once you get into it and you're neck deep in it, you get to know everybody.
Well, we're gonna take a little break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk to you about the photography business that you were able to start, and how that's affecting your lives. And also, Tom's no stranger to adversity. There was a fire that happened in their home recently. It's been over a year now, but we're gonna talk to Tom about what that was like when you've got all these other things going on, the real life stuff. So we'll be back with Tom after these messages.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides courses in applied behavior analysis for the treatment of autism. Access IBT e-learning videos on the move and learn at your own pace.
I'm going to talk a little bit about intensity.
IBT e-learning makes any location your classroom on the go.
So our objectives for today are to really learn what is autism and how is it diagnosed.
Get professional guidance with IBT face-to-face training. IBT face-to-face training courses prepare you to effectively implement ABA-based interventions. Choose between small group and one-to-one instruction. Earn BCBA supervision hours via one-to-one video conferencing.
So I had a chance to review your BIP today. You know what? It looked really good. You did a good job with that.
IBT continuing education courses. Earn credit through webinars, conferences, article reviews, and e-learning videos. You can learn more at ibehavioraltraining.com. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
We are back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and we are having a great conversation with Tom Hibben, who is the blogger on Adventures in Aspergers, and shares his often hilarious adventures with his 3 sons, one of whom has Asperger's syndrome, and another son who has some learning delays and other issues. And Tom helps us find the humor in all this. And before we went to break, Shannon, you were asking Tom about some other adversity that he's recently had.
Yeah, as if all those things weren't enough, your family suffered a devastating fire. It was a little over a year ago, am I correct?
Just a little over a year ago, our wedding anniversary, actually.
So because we haven't had you back on the show since this, tell us what happened. And obviously everybody was okay, except you lost a pet, right?
The cat got out of the house and went to live on a farm.
Okay, all right.
Oh, okay. So we didn't lose the cat in the fire. The cat escaped.
That's right.
Good.
Thank heavens. The cat went on to greener pastures.
Cat has 9 lives.
That's right.
Just a little bit over a year ago, we went out to dinner, which about 30 minutes away. The kids were at a church daycare that their grandmother is a director at, so they were kind of hanging out and playing, and we went out to lunch, and I got a call from my retired firefighter grandfather who still can't sleep without the radio on, and he's listening to it. He says, "I think your house is on fire," and I was like, I just didn't even understand. He wasn't speaking English, so it was Yiddish. So we turned on our scanner because, too many years in EMS, I always have one on me. So, and we could hear them breaking through the neighbor's attic, either condos, 2-story townhomes, and we could hear them going through one attic into our home, talking about how it was fully engulfed and everything was gone. And when we pulled up, the roof was gone. I'm sure you've seen pictures on the blog. It was just a complete and total loss. The only thing salvaged was we have some friends that are on the fire department. Thankfully, they were able to kind of give me a tap in the cheek and say, "Listen, where is the important stuff at?"
Wow.
And those guys pulled a cedar chest with all the pictures and birth certificates, and it was still on fire when they carried it out. They were walking places, and it was the only thing that survived is that box. I mean, it was but that's the only thing that wasn't replaceable. So
devastating.
So you lost everything. You know, oftentimes I think people that aren't in the autism world don't realize that all the other problems that happen and challenges with life happen on top of the autism. So, you know, and that often, you know, it's hard enough with our challenges with our kids, but then when we have all these other real life challenges that come in.
You don't have time to, you know, mourn or grieve yourself. You know, the first thing through your head is, how is he going to take this, or how are we going to spin this to make it okay? So,
and you guys did that very successfully, and people can read some of it on the blog to hear. But you know, how is he doing now? Obviously, you guys are completely relocated. You were able to continue with your business, which is a thriving photography business.
You know, we actually had a wedding. We had all our gear at home from the studio, because we had a wedding 2 days later to take pictures at, and so we lost everything. But between the community coming together for us, and I mean, not even our home community, but the online and autism community, Sunday Stillwell, who everybody knows from you know, Extreme Parenthood, set up a fund for us. I mean, it took us months to get the insurance money, but before that, I mean, Sunday's Fund and the autism community, this blog that I'm on, you know, it's like $5,000, $6,000, and just people we didn't know. I had Walmart delivering stuff from people who didn't know what Walmart was in the UK, you know, like Toy Story sheets and stuff, you know. So, I mean, people, like, they just restore your faith in people, and they just $5 here, $500 there, and it's just, you know, people just amaze you. So people you don't even know.
Well,
they do.
remarkable.
They sure do. And we need to hear those stories.
Absolutely, we do. We're almost out of time, Tom, but we'd love to hear from you. Any advice that you would give to other dads?
Take it with a grain of salt and appreciate your wife, or she will hit you. I mean, this stuff is so ridiculous. I mean, that's why it makes good TV shows like Big Bang Theory and stuff like that. It's like, it's hilarious. Just sometimes when it's frustrating, you just have to kick back and just be like, really, that just happened? I mean, so just grain of salt. Everything is step by step, and you can't get too far ahead of yourself.
Well, we love that advice, especially the be nice to your wife part.
Yeah, we do. I hope Reed and Jim are listening, but I don't think they are.
Sorry, guys.
But the sense of humor part about it is just as important, I have to say.
Definitely. Let's not take ourselves too seriously, guys. You
absolutely
know?
love it. Well, again, we want to encourage everybody to go to adventuresinaspergers.com. It will warm your heart. You will see beautiful pictures, and you will hear some great stories about what real life is like when you've got a life an adventure in Asperger's. And we have to promote your photography business. If people are in that area, Tom, and I know you said you might be doing some traveling soon, how can people look at the pictures? Because you guys do gorgeous work.
Well, thank you. There's a link on the blog, but also my last name, Hibben, Hibben, photography.com.
Okay.
We are, you know, we do a lot of special needs kids, and like you said, this year we hope to do some traveling to other cities to do special needs families that maybe it's hard to get these kids to, and especially a photographer that understands how to deal with the kids and is not going to stress you out and make you, you know, at a horrible experience, but you still need to capture memories. So hopefully that's coming soon.
And I hope that after that there'll be a beautiful coffee table book of families that have autism in their families. So let's push for that, because you do beautiful work.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Tom, and go have yourself some fun adventures.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so we're going to come back with Erik Menyuk, and we're going to talk about his upcoming seminar and also about some of the challenges that parents are facing now with the school district, if they do have regional center, with regional center. So he's going to share some of that knowledge that's going to be found in this upcoming seminar.
Because we all know that knowledge is power, and we could all use some power today, right?
Right.
All right.
So we'll be right back.
My name is Rachel. My son is Kyle. He has autism.
I am Kyle. I am 9 years old.
He's been with CARD since he was 2 years old, so that's about 7 years. We've been really fortunate that we've seen so much change in Kyle that you would really not even realize he has autism.
The front of the book has an artwork piece.
Is that me?
No, that's a self-portrait, that's why.
I thought so. Look, you're wearing the same kind of color shirt. He had been going along with pretty main milestones. He had walked on time, he had sat on time, he was looking at me at different things and laughed, and he had about 5 words, and then all of a sudden he lost the words. And I would call his name and he wouldn't look at me anymore. He all of a sudden went into his own world. I mean, I just noticed like he slipped away from us. I got into UCLA because somebody called in sick one day, and we were on her waiting list, but she said, oh, I had a cancellation, can you bring your son in today? I took my son in with my mom, and we had a 2.5-hour appointment where they observed his behavior, noticed they didn't have any words. He was climbing all over things and jumping off her furniture because he had no sense of fear. He couldn't actually feel very much. The doctor told me, ask for CARD, you can call them. I called them and got on their waiting list, and then I started researching what ABA was. ABA with CARD was the only scientific-based research that had shown that children could improve, or now they even say recover. And my son, I think, having all this therapy early, he's going to graduate from CARD. He's going to be able to be part of the community as a typical kid. How does it make you feel when you play the violin?
It makes me a little bit calmer.
Kyle, early on, he only liked baby food, and even at age 4, he was eating baby food, and he liked lots of flavors, but he didn't like anything with the texture. So he wanted everything pureed. So if you can imagine, as a mom, I'm up, cooking carrots and then pureeing them when he couldn't just have a carrot. It was really time consuming, and I could get the protein and everything into him, but he wasn't eating like a typical child. It was 1 year later, he, instead of eating blended bananas, he was now, peeling the banana and biting into the banana. Taking a hot dog on a gluten-free bun and biting into it, I mean, that is just amazing. So that was one of the main things I came home thinking, wow, this is great. It really was a relief for me because I was doing a lot of blending. I think I went through 3 blenders, and that's just not every mom that wants to have a regular meal and be able to have the same food with their son. So it really helped. Right now, he's on the road to recovery, we call it, and I really do think that Kyle, in a year or 2, will not even need assistance with therapists. He really is in a typical class, and he's at the highest level. He's in the advanced level. He's in a GATE class. I don't even think anyone knows in his class he has autism because he's just there.
This is a mobile. I got a very good grade on it. I got 4 because my teacher said that she learned a lot about Neil Armstrong. This is a drawing of Neil's first footprint on the moon.
Is his footprint still there?
Yeah, it is, and his boots.
And his boots.
He left his boots on the moon.
He did. Everyone thinks he's very kind, and he gives hugs to everyone, so the social interaction is there. He's very intelligent. He's highest in his class, and he makes friends, and he loves to read, and he's just a part of groups when he meets people.
My first trip to SeaWorld, I wrote it, but I wanted to make sure that you noticed that the sun is moving higher.
What does that signify?
That signifies that time is going. This is artwork in a frame. That took me a lot of work to do. I have some instruments over here. Something inspired me to make instruments. This was from last year for a fundraiser. This is the surfing pictures.
So here you're going on the surfboard, and did you stand up right away?
Yeah, I did.
You did. And show us how your stance on the surfboard. Ready? Go. And what's your favorite part about surfing?
The very first time I wrote the wipeout. And I hope that you enjoyed me, Mom, and all of my interests in learning a little bit about me. The end.
We are back with Let's Talk Autism, and Shannon and I are now joined by a special guest, Erik Menyuk.
Very good.
An attorney from Newman, Aaronson and Vanaman, which is the largest and longest established law firm in California, specializing in representing children and adults with disabilities. And you have an interactive seminar coming up on February 8th.
February 8th, 2014.
Okay.
At the Sportsman's Lodge, yeah.
In California, at the Sportsman's Lodge. And tell us what this seminar is about, Erik.
Well, one of the great joys about working at Newman, Aaronson, Vanaman is being the largest firm out there. You have a lot of attorneys.
Right.
So you have a lot of attorneys who are going to mediations, going to due process, going to IEPs. We have advocates who work with our firm. And they're all coming back with stories, because really, I mean, if I was to sum up special education law in a nutshell, it's about the stories, it's about the individuals. And so what we decided to do is put together a seminar. It's going to be broken up into 3 parts. The first part is really you're going to have 10 of us attorneys on stage, and we're all going to go through the process that you go through with school districts, from nuts to bolts, from A to Z, with how you approach the district, how you communicate with the district, how you go handle yourself in an IEP meeting, all of those steps, all the way up through how you fight the school district. But it's really going to be a perspective based on what we see that it's happening now, today, in the trenches. And that's important. I mean, because although, as we know, I mean, the law hasn't changed, but in this day and age, when the dollars are the dollars, and I've heard school district people say to parents, which always infuriates me, my job is to be the guardian of the district funds. That's my job. And I'm thinking, well, I thought your job was to educate people. But that aside, there is, sort of different tactics that you have to take in this day and age to really document going through the process what you need to do. The second part of the seminar, we're going to have breakout sessions. I'm going to handle the effective advocacy because that's what I do, hopefully effectively. And I'm going to be joined by a couple other attorneys, Alexis Casillas, a very young attorney with our firm who's terrific, just amazing attorney, and Brian Wynn, who I've done cases with. We're also going to be inviting in Judy Marks, Harvey Lappin, and Connie Lappin, and these people are instrumental in getting the legislature in California to pass the self-determination law, which is basically saying for regional center, now you have control over your service dollars. And they're going to talk about, a little bit about the history, about what went into that, but most of all, again, this is a nuts and bolts seminar. This is going to be how you now handle this aspect of getting services from regional centers. And then finally, we're also going to deal with, which we sort of have a group of people that specialize in this, in transitions, because, although transitions in the IEP world happen, at high school and what's going to happen beyond high school, in reality, transitions happens all along. And as you know, dealing with kids with autism, what is one of the most difficult things for these kids to deal with? Transitions. And so it becomes almost crucial as you go through the process to understand that. And then we've invited a law professor from Ohio State University, Ruth Coker. And what I really liked about Professor Coker, when I read her book, she wrote this book, Disabled Education. And it's a survey of all the administrative law decisions across the country, and kind of goes through how the IDEA, the law under which we practice for special education, has been effective in certain areas, not effective in other areas, and why, from our perspective, certainly from the parents' bar perspective, why these cases seem so biased against parents. And Professor Coker is actually the parent of a disabled child. She has a child with autism, and has written several books on these issues.
So her work is out there to be read.
Absolutely.
Tell us how people can learn about this. Where can they register?
At our website, www.navlaw.net. There'll be a big banner, hopefully, there that will say register for. There it is. Okay, there you go. There's a big banner on the website that says, register here. And, one of the things that for me, we're going to have advocates there, we're going to have attorneys there. It's really important that this seminar reach the parents.
Right.
So one of the things that I would like to do is offer for viewers of this show is free admission.
Okay. Wow.
It's amazing.
I would really like to do that.
Because it's $100 admission.
It was what we said, and I said, this is an impetus from Valerie, but from everyone at the firm, they were saying, you know what, we need to get the word out there.
Right.
And so we were getting the word out there, we were getting attendance, but from, a certain population.
Sure.
We really want a diverse population, and people really need this information.
Right.
So for people who are watching this, if they go on and they'll see a code and it says enter promotion code or whatever, and I believe it is, and I'm going to be wrong, I have to call in, but NAVSHIP, N-A-V, all caps, capital S-H-I-P,
Okay.
NAVSHIP.
Okay, great information. All right, we're going to come back, talk a little bit more about these issues for maybe some of the people that cannot attend this, some of the challenges that are facing us that
absolutely.
are great but not impossible in your words.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Bryce Myler, and I'm the Contracts Director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I've been here for about 5 years. CARD has several employees with many years of insurance experience, dealing with insurance, dealing with pre-authorizations, dealing with discovering whether there's coverage or not. So we have more experience than any ABA provider that I've ever come across. So for a prospective client, somebody that may be interested in, ABA therapy and what CARD has to offer, we have a special 800 number, and you call that number. They will talk to you about what we have to offer, how ABA works. He'll ask you for the front and back of your ID card, and then we check to see if you do or do not have coverage. If you have coverage for ABA therapy, we try to do whatever we can to set it up where we can bill for you and you don't have to fight with the insurance company every month to get your claims paid. For California residents, we recently did a series of insurance trainings all over the state, and you can click on the link below to watch pretty much the full presentation. It has a lot of information, how you can get your insurance company to comply with what they're supposed to do, understanding the networks, and many other valuable pieces of information.
All right, we're having fun talking here. We're back with Erik Menyuk, and we all love to talk, the three of us. So we've been talking about their upcoming seminar on February 8th, current issues, school districts and regional centers. And now we want to cover some issues that, in case you can't make it to this seminar, Erik says there are many challenges that parents are facing now that are great but not impossible. So one of those, we wanted to know, you said how Rowley needs to be re-examined. The floor of opportunity has become a goal, not an actual floor. What is Rowley, and why does it need to be re-examined?
Great question. Rowley is a Supreme Court case that happened, I believe, in the 1980s. Dealt with a kindergarten girl, Ann Rowley, who was deaf.
Okay.
And parents were asking for a sign language interpreter in her kindergarten class. And this is, one of those cases lawyers like to talk about bad facts make bad law. Mm-hmm. And in this case, at least from a parent's perspective, there's some bad facts here, which is you had a really good school district. Mm-hmm. You had a school district who had actually tried a sign language interpreter in kindergarten, and Ann Rowley, being a kindergarten student, she didn't really pay much attention, and she could communicate by other means, especially at that age. And so what ended up happening is you ended up with this Board of Education v. Rowley that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, look, a school district's responsibility is not to give the best education possible. It's not to maximize the education possible. And you've all heard this before.
Yes, we have.
And this is just, now you know where it comes from.
Is the word.
This is, free appropriate public education is part of the statute.
Okay.
But this whole notion that we don't have to maximize education, this is all from Rowley.
Okay.
And so they said what the school district is responsible for is providing a floor of opportunity. Well, once you tell a school district that all you're responsible for is providing this floor of opportunity, what we've seen, especially recently, as funds become more scarce, is that floor gets a little bit lower, and school districts are now trying to reach the floor. And if they don't quite reach it, then the floor drops a little. And this has happened we've seen this from school districts fighting harder. Mm-hmm. we've seen this from administrative law judges that are supposed to be protecting the rights of disabled children. And they, I cannot tell you how many mediations I've been at where I hear a parent I'm sitting with will say, look, I want what's best for my child. And the judge will say, well, I understand that. But the law only provides for the floor of opportunity. And
that's a very odd term, though, to interpret, isn't it? The floor of opportunity?
A very hard term. And so, you get, you're dancing on the head of a pin here, which is what lawyers love to do, and I personally hate it. My perspective I got into this law from other areas of law, because this is a human area of law. We're dealing with children. We're dealing with kids that need an education, kids that need services from regional centers. And the issue is, how do we serve these children? Yes, I understand. We don't have to, school districts are not required to turn every child into Albert Einstein. If they could, that would be great. But that's not their responsibility. But to then go back, which I feel we've done, and say, look, we're struggling here to give the kids the basic floor of opportunity. And so, I have cases where I'll show up with a kid, he's, and I call these all my children kids, so I hope you don't mind, but where they show up and they're very high IQ for whatever that's worth, very smart, but not getting it for whatever reasons, whether it's auditory processing, visual processing, they're on the spectrum, whatever reason.
Not having the appropriate behavioral intervention.
Not having
access learning.
All of that goes into place. And yet, because they're not failing out, because they have good parents who are getting them to school, because a lot of times these kids end up just not even wanting to go to school. Because of all that, that's okay, that's sufficient, that's appropriate. And then one of the offshoots of this is that you end up with these IEP documents. That's an individualized education program, which sort of outlines the education for these children, what their present levels of performance are, what the goals and objectives for the future are, what services and what placement. You get these sort of standardized goals that teachers will come in and they will testify under oath that this student's making progress. I have a 10th grader who is a gifted student in 4th grade who is now failing in 10th grade, and the school district is saying, well, he hasn't failed. And that's perfectly fine.
So all of this, great information, but what do we do about it?
How can parents better protect their children's rights? What can parents do?
And I have a kind of a personally unique view of this, because I truly believe that parents are, always will be, the best advocates for their children. Now, what is hard is taking out the anger and frustration and all of that from the equation. I get very passionate about these kids. I adore them, and it seems to be reprehensible that we as a society are not giving them what they need. That said, when I go into a mediation, when I go into an IEP or anything like that, I'm really trying hard to suss out the relationship with the people there. I think it is really important that parents know going into these meetings that you're dealing with educators, and they have to deal with all sorts of parents. They have to deal with who was the helicopter mom you said earlier, but the super helicopter mom who comes into school, with their kid and all this other stuff. So, and who's trying to tell the teacher how to teach their class, and it's very frustrating for them. They also are subject to this cost cutting. So they're having to do more with less.
Larger class sizes, less materials, less resources.
So what I tell parents is when you go in to meet with them, at least try to realize that these are other human beings across the table from you. They may not, and this oftentimes parents say to me all the time, they don't get my child. They don't get my child. I said, I understand that, and you may be right, but then it's your job to teach them who your child is. And the other thing I will say is nothing takes place in special education if it isn't written down. You want to document everything.
So you're saying parents, you have here document.
Right.
What kinds of things do parents need to document?
When you communicate, what I often will tell my clients is if you're having issues at school, write what those issues are, just list them, no attacking people.
Right,
Just list what
right.
the issues are. Remember, this is about your child.
Right.
And send that off to the teacher.
Okay, so immediately, instead of letting time wait,
Oh, no.
your child is having a problem accessing, let's say, the math curriculum.
Right.
And they're not keeping up, too much homework's coming home, they're swamped. They should, you're advising that they immediately contact the teacher. Should they let the principal know, or just the teacher? I mean,
At first, the risk you always run in this is, quote unquote, going over people's heads.
Right.
So what you want to do is, and you don't, here's what I also tell people, don't mug your teacher, your child's teacher. Don't find them when they're running around with kids.
Right.
And say, excuse me, I need to talk to you.
Yes.
I think it's also, and like I said, much better when you document anyway, is, give them a chance to reply. If they don't reply, then, 2 days, 3 days later, let the principal know, hey, I understand you're really busy.
Yeah.
But I really need an answer on this.
But you're saying try not to be so adversarial, try to be conciliatory, try and be more of an ambassador with the
Yes,
school, and
absolutely.
really try to work with them so you could at least establish that you've tried to work with them.
Right. And document the fact that you've tried to work with
And
them.
I appreciate that, because I think a lot of times I tend to be the parent who wants to go and talk to the teacher at the gate after everybody has left. But then when you go back over something, and my teachers at my son's school are great, but later on when I'm trying to explain to somebody, well, we talked about this, it would probably be better for the teacher, and it would be much better for my child and for my case if I had just sent an email. And then I can go back over the thread and say, here's what we've already established. It gives you protection.
Absolutely. It gives you protection. It also, as you said, it provides a roadmap for you, for the teachers, for the school district, for everyone. And, a lot of times by the time parents get to me, a lot of times these communications have broken down.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of animosity, there's a lot of, and part of my job, at least as I see it, is to bridge that gap. Because I come in, no matter what I do, if I go to mediation, if I go to a hearing, if I go to federal court even, your child is still in the school system. You still have to work with these people.
Yes, you don't want to have a situation where you're really at war with one another after the issues have been resolved.
Right, absolutely. Nor do you want an issue, even if, because this is a yearly process. IEPs happen every year.
Yeah.
We have, unfortunately, a lot of repeat customers who come back in. And, the issue is that every time it becomes it's about a different matter, it's about a different struggle. Your child has grown up. The facts have changed.
Yeah.
And yet if you don't have that roadmap, you don't see where he came from or she came from and where he or she is going. Okay. And that's important.
Where are you on tape recorders? Do you recommend?
Definitely.
Okay, because I'm that way about it too, but I'd love to hear always from our lawyer. Whenever we talk to a lawyer, we're all about, because a lot of parents think, well, if I come in and I ask for the tape recorder, they're going to think I'm adversarial and that might be a bad thing.
Yes, and I would say 3 or 4 years ago, if I was dealing with a sort of an okay situation, I'd say, you don't have to. Now I tell all my parents to tape record everything. And I think, to your point about being adversarial, there are actually 2 issues I'll say about that. I went to IEPs for my son for years. I never went without an advocate.
Okay.
Me, who does this, never went without an advocate because there's so many emotions involved, and I need a check.
Right.
I need a check on me. Having said that, I think there's real value in not having an advocate or not having an attorney there. And that's why I used to say...
Well, and so many parents, quite frankly, let's face it, don't have the resources.
Right,
At least
absolutely.
in that first meeting, when you're trying to see if you can work it out in the first one.
Right.
Later on, sometimes you just have to, you have to cash in that bond that grandma gave you.
Right.
Or whatever, because you go, now we've got a kitchen fire and we got to have somebody to help us. But in that first meeting, a lot of times you don't have the choice.
You don't. And to give parents a little comfort, honestly, when you bring an attorney to an IEP meeting, it's a different meeting. I mean, because they'll probably bring their attorney to the meeting, and then it becomes sort of a more of an adversarial.
Posturing.
Yeah. They say we're gearing up for a 5-year.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that very little can take place at an IEP meeting that cannot be remedied afterwards.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't want to say anything outrageous, or you certainly don't want to agree to anything in writing.
Right.
But just showing up and talking to people is, I find that for me afterwards dealing with it, that I end up with a lot of good material because the school district feels much more free.
Okay.
So you know what, I think, Johnny would actually be better off with a private speech therapist because of his issues. But you didn't hear that from me.
Right, but if it's on the tape recorder, you sure did.
Right,
exactly.
So,
yeah.
So, and they certainly would never have said that if an attorney was there.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
Good
So,
point.
and the whole purpose of this law, ostensibly, was to be non-adversarial, and which has sort of gone by the wayside now, because we really are living in an era of limited services.
Absolutely.
I want to just touch on regional centers for a minute, and we are an international broadcast, podcast. So a lot of the families that are listening, and a lot of our viewers don't have regional center services, but for those that do, what have been some of the biggest issues now with the regional center?
Well, as I said, right now the big issue, of course, is this passage of the self-determination law, which will be taking effect over the year.
Can you just explain, the self-determination law is what?
I will not profess to be an expert in this, but this is my understanding, is that the way it worked usually with regional centers, they vendored with certain providers. So if you went to the regional center and they said, for example, you need ABA services, they can pick from their vendored companies and determine who your son will see.
Okay.
And what the self-determination dollars do in a nutshell is basically give you, we will provide these services at this rate, you go out and you find the provider. Now the provider has to meet certain criteria, but it is your determination as to what that provider is, and to a certain extent, what service is going to be provided. Because, as I often say, you can get 6 parents of kids with autism in a room, and all 6 are getting different therapies, different services, etc.
So the way I interpret this is then, so let's say regional center, they assess your child on the autism spectrum, we're giving you this many hours a week of ABA, then the parent can then go and say, well, I want CARD to provide that ABA. Treatment.
Right.
And that's what this is basically in a nutshell.
Yeah, they said regional centers kind of gone from an HMO to a PBO. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's kind of it.
See, I never knew what that really was. So
that
that's
is.
to know.
And again, I don't profess to be an expert on this, just so you know. So that's.
But you are going to have an expert at this seminar, and the Latons, Connie Lapin, was really a pioneer in this area.
Huge.
We need to get her on this show. But so she a huge pioneer in this, and parents can really learn about this.
And she's a great presenter, and she does really good. She puts on a really good show.
Okay,
so it's all good. So it's all good.
And so there'll be more discussion about that, but that's one of the big things that going on right now. But one of the other things we wanted to talk to you about is this idea that districts are developing programs that look good on paper, but they really aren't. And for parents, this is so disheartening.
This is sort of a situation that I personally have found my son in, and my husband and I were rather naive in the beginning of the IEP process, which started with the preschool, with the public school. At the IEP, it all sounded so beautiful, but then in reality, what we found was not beautiful at all, was our son being placed in a special resource room with children that were lower functioning, him coming home, emulating behaviors, and lots of regression going on. So you're promised one thing, and it sounds beautiful when you're in the room, and then 6 months later, you go, what's happening with my child? So what can we do about this?
And Nancy, it was interesting, because I guess earlier you had on, I guess it was a pre-tape thing about my son can't tell me what's going on at school.
Yeah. Mommy, I wish I could tell you what happened to me at school today.
That is so important, and I cannot tell you how many parents come to me and say, well, I don't know, he seems to be exhibiting all these behaviors he's never had before. And I said, well, what is going on? Well, you look at the IEP, it's a really good IEP. He's getting one-on-one aid, he's got behavioral aid, he's got supervision, he's got speech, he's got all of this. But when you go and observe, well, he may or may not be having a one-on-one aid. That aid may be dealing with the lower functioning child across the room. He may or may not be getting the speech services that are on the IEP. There may be a speech therapist coming in who's logging her time, but she's basically working with 5 kids with an iPad pointing to things. And this is obviously stories I'm telling you from experience. This is not, so you have kids who are nonverbal working with kids who are verbal, and they're just pointing at, where's the fruit? Where's the apple?
And so you're saying that the parents need to go in and observe?
They need to. They need to go in and observe, and even better, and this is an unfortunate aspect of this area of law, is that the Supreme Court, aside from morality, the other case that needs to be overturned is Arlington, because that said that parents are responsible for their own expert fees. So it becomes very difficult to get someone to go in who knows what to look for and to be able to say, you know, this is really not.
So even better would be maybe your child's behaviorist, the supervisor, which in my case we have done. We have had the ABA supervisor go in, observe what implementations were being, you know, what the plan was, and it was totally inappropriate in the case of my son.
Right.
So,
unfortunately, we are like so out of time.
I'm so sorry.
And I am too, because we're having such a great conversation, but I want to leave time for you to talk about where people can access information about your law firm and this seminar that you're doing.
Okay. We are at, www, no one says that anymore. We are at navlaw.net, NAVLAW.net. They can call in, and also, just so you know, we will hear, because we're very busy, but we work for parents. Every attorney on this list is really parent-focused. It's a great firm. And so if you feel like a little shy about calling an attorney, what's it going to cost me, call in, because we have
and can
plans
I just
for everyone.
interject here that one of the best uses, you know, I am executive director of ACT Today, Autism Care and Treatment Today, and one of the things we will fund is advocates and attorneys. A lot of people don't know this. If you do have a case, go to our website, act-today.org, go to the grant application. If you have a particularly dire case where you really feel you need an attorney, please go to ACT Today, apply for a grant. I think it's one of the best uses of our funds. We have had miracles happen with some of our kids who have had just terrible, terrible services, and then we've gotten them great services through an attorney or advocate.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean, and I just, it's not just Newman, Aaronson and Vanaman, of course, I think we're the best, but but most parent attorneys, if you have gotten into this because they either have a son, you know, we were talking about Bonnie Yates, a very talented woman, has a son who's on the spectrum. We all have or know someone on the spectrum or has a disability. We're there for the kids. So if we can help you, make it work. The funds are
remarkable. We are out of time. I will let you know that we're back tomorrow at 10 a.m. For a live show. We'll have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox with us. We'll have Dr. Adele Nadowski, and we will also have a wonderful blogger who will be with us as well.
And I'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you to Erik.
Thank you, Erik, and thank you all. And as you always say,
give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye.